Lizzie Borden was tried and acquitted for the murder of her father and stepmother in the 1890s.
Lizzie's father and stepmother were brutally killed in their home in Massachusetts.
They were both slain by repeated blows with a hatchet. Their story has since become lore, their home now a bed and breakfast to those who dare shut their eyes.
The Lizzie Borden house, where the famous murders happened.
A mystery man seen at their home days before the murders.
You probably think you know all there is to know about the infamous Lizzie Borden.
Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks, and when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. This old schoolyard rhyme has been used by children for the past 130 years. Lizzie Andrew Borden is the main character, of course. She was born July 19, 1860, in Fall River, Massachusetts, to Sarah Anthony Borden and Andrew Jackson Borden. Her father was of English and Welsh descent. He grew up in a very modest household. He struggled financially as a young man, despite being the son of wealthy, influential parents. After a short while, Andrew found his calling in the manufacturing and sale of furniture and caskets. He became a very wealthy man. After a while, he continued his success as a property developer. He became the director of several textile mills and owned a lot of commercial properties. Andrew was also president of the Union Savings Bank and director of the DeFree Safe Deposit and Trust Company. His net worth was $300,000 in 1892. Worth about $9,600,000 with inflation in 2023. Despite his immense wealth, Andrew was known to be very frugal with his money. For instance, the home of the Bordens did not have indoor plumbing in the 1890s. It was very common for wealthy, influential people, and even the upper middle class, to have indoor plumbing. But the Bordens still had an outhouse to do their business and wash their dishes with an old hand pump well. The Borden home was in a great neighborhood, but the wealthy residents of Fall River, including Andrew's wealthy cousins, lived in a much more fashionable neighborhood called The Hill. It was further outside the industrial city center. Lizzie and her sister Emma Borden were brought up very religious by their parents. They attended Central Congregational Church. As a young woman, Lizzie was involved in many church activities, including teaching Sunday school to children who recently immigrated to the United States. She was involved in religious organizations. She was the secretary and treasurer of the Christian Endeavor Society, and she was a member of the Women's Christian Temperance Union and of the Ladies' Fruit and Flower Mission. In 1863, Lizzie and Emma's mother died. 3 years later, Andrew married Abby DeFree Gray. It is said that Lizzie believed Abby married her father for his wealth. There were tensions in the Borden household. Bridget Sullivan, the Bordens' 25-year-old live-in maid, who they called Maggie, testified that the two girls rarely ate meals with their parents. In early 1892, Lizzie had built a roost in the family barn to house pigeons in. Local children would sneak onto the Borden property to hunt these pigeons. In 1892, Andrew was fed up with the trespassers going after pigeons on his property. He was going to put an end to it. Andrew grabbed a hatchet and went out to the barn, and he killed Lizzie's pigeons one by one. It has been recounted by everyone that Lizzie was very upset about her father killing her pigeons. After a family argument in July of 1892, the Borden girls took an extended vacation in New Bedford. Lizzie returned to Fall River in late July and chose to stay in a rooming house for 4 days before returning to the Borden home. For months leading up to August 1892, there had been many arguments, especially over Andrew giving real estate to many members of Abby's family. After Abby's sister received a house as a gift from Andrew, the two Borden girls demanded a home as well. Their old family home where they had lived until their mother had died in 1863. It had been used as a rental property. Emma and Lizzie purchased the home from their father for $1. A few weeks before the murders, Lizzie and Emma sold the house back to their father for $5,000, about $163,000 with inflation in 2023. John Morse, Lizzie and Emma's uncle, had been invited to stay for a few days to discuss business matters with Andrew. It is believed this made tensions in the Borden home even higher, because the conversations were mainly about property transfers. A few days before the murders, the whole Borden household had fell violently ill. Abby feared that they had been poisoned, since Andrew was not a popular man in Fall River. Some believe spoiled mutton that was left on the stove was the cause of this mystery illness, but others don't. The murders. John Morse arrived the evening of August 3rd, and he slept in the guest bedroom that night. At breakfast the next morning, Andrew, Abby, Lizzie, Morse, and Maggie were present. Andrew and John Morse went into the sitting room to talk business for about an hour. John Morse left at 8:48 a.m. to purchase a pair of oxen and visit his niece in Fall River. He planned to return to the Borden home in time for lunch at noon. Just after John Morse left, Andrew decided to go for a walk at 9 a.m. Even though Emma and Lizzie were supposed to clean the guest room as one of their chores, Abby went upstairs sometime between 9 and 10:30 a.m. to make the bed. According to forensic investigations later, it is believed Abby was facing her killer when she was attacked. She was struck 19 times with a hatchet. Andrew returned from his walk around 10:30 a.m. His key would not open the door, so he knocked. The maid heard him and went to unlock the door, but found that the lock was jammed. The maid, Bridget Sullivan, later testified that she heard Lizzie laughing immediately after this happened. She did not see Lizzie, but stated that the laughter was coming from the top of the stairs. The testimony was considered very significant since Abby was already deceased by this point, and the body would have been visible to anybody who had walked on the second floor. Lizzie denied being on the second floor and testified that her father asked her where Abby was. She told her father that a messenger had delivered a summons to Abby with a request to visit a sick friend. Bridget Sullivan testified that she had removed Andrew's boots and helped him into his slippers before he lay down on the sofa to take a nap. The testimony was contradicted by crime scene photographs, which showed Andrew deceased on the sofa, still wearing his boots. She testified that she was in her third-floor room resting after cleaning the windows, when just before 11:10 a.m. she heard Lizzie call from downstairs. "Maggie, come quick! Father's dead! Somebody came in and killed him!" Andrew was slumped on the sofa in the downstairs sitting room. He was struck 10 or 11 times with a hatchet-like weapon. Evidence shows that Andrew was most likely asleep when the attack happened. When Bridget Sullivan arrived downstairs, Andrew was still bleeding. The attack had been very recent. Dr. Bowen was summoned. He was the family's physician. He lived across the street and pronounced both Abby and Andrew dead. Detectives estimate that Andrew died at approximately 11 a.m. The investigation. The police state that Lizzie's initial answers to their questions were strange and contradictory. She reported hearing groaning or scraping noises or distress call before entering the house. 2 hours later, she told police that she heard nothing and entered the house, not realizing anything was wrong. When she was asked where her stepmother was, she recounted that Abby had received a note asking her to visit a sick friend. She also stated that she thought Abby had returned and asked if somebody could go upstairs and look for her. Sullivan and a neighbor, Miss Churchill, had reached halfway up the stairs. Their eyes were level with the floor when they looked under the guest room and saw Abby lying face down on the floor. Most of the officers who interviewed Lizzie disliked her attitude. Some stated she was too calm. Despite her changing stories, her changing alibi, and her strange behavior, she was not checked for bloodstains. The police searched her room, but they were only for a short period of time. At the trial, they admitted to not doing a thorough search because Lizzie was not feeling well. They were criticized for their lack of diligence. The police searched the home, and in the basement, the police found 2 hatchets, 2 axes, and a hatchet head with a broken handle. The hatchet head was suspected of being the murder weapon. The break in the handle appeared fresh and had ashen dust on the head. Unlike the other tools in the basement, this one appeared to have dust deliberately applied to it to make it look like it had been in the basement for some time. Unfortunately, none of the tools were removed from the home. Because of the mystery illness that had affected the household shortly before the murders, the family's milk was tested along with the victims' stomachs. They were tested for poison. Although none was found, the autopsies were performed in the Borden's dining room. Residents of Fall River suspected Lizzie of purchasing hydrochloric acid from the local druggist. Her defense is she inquired about the acid in order to clean her furs. Alice Russell, a friend of Emma and Lizzie, decided to stay the night with the sisters, while John Morse spent the night in the attic guest room, contrary to people believing that he slept in the murder room. Police were stationed around the house the night of August 4th, during which an officer said that he had seen Lizzie enter the cellar with Russell carrying an oil lamp and a slop pail. The police officer stated he saw both women exit the cellar, after which Lizzie returned alone. Though he was unable to see what she was doing, he stated it appeared that she was bent over the sink. The next day, August 5th, Morse left the Borden residence and was mobbed by hundreds of people. The police had to escort him back to the home. The following day, the police conducted a much more thorough search of the house, inspecting the sisters' clothing and confiscating the broken hatchet head. That evening, a police officer and the mayor visited the house, and Lizzie was informed that she was a suspect for the murders. The next morning, Russell entered the kitchen to find Lizzie tearing up her dress. Lizzie explained that she was planning to put it in the fire because it was covered in paint. It was never determined whether or not it was the dress she had been wearing on the day of the murders. The inquest. Lizzie appeared at the inquest hearing on August 8th. She requested to have her family attorney present, but it was refused, under the state statute providing that an inquest must be held in private. Lizzie was prescribed a regular dose of morphine to calm her nerves. It is possible her testimony was affected by the morphine. Her behavior was erratic, and she often refused to answer questions, even ones that were beneficial to her. She continually contradicted herself and provided alternate accounts of the morning in question, such as saying she was in the kitchen reading a magazine when her father arrived home, then stating that she was in the dining room doing some ironing, and then that she was coming down the stairs. The district attorney was very aggressive and confrontational. On August 11th, Lizzie was served an arrest warrant and she was put in jail. Lizzie's testimony during the inquest was later ruled inadmissible in her trial in 1893. Newspaper articles from the time noted that Lizzie possessed a stolid demeanor and bit her lips, flushed, and bent forward towards Attorney Adams. Newspapers also reported that the testimony provided in the inquest caused a change of opinion among her friends and family who had strongly maintained her innocence. Lizzie's inquest received significant attention in the press. A grand jury began hearing the evidence on November 7, 1892. Lizzie indicted on December 2nd. The trial. Lizzie Borden's trial took place in New Bedford starting on June 5, 1893. The prosecuting attorneys were Hosea Knowlton and William Moody. Lizzie's defense attorneys were Andrew Jennings, Melvin Adams, and George Robinson. But just 5 days before the trial of Lizzie Borden, on June 1, 1893, another axe murder occurred in the town of Fall River. Bertha Manchester was the victim. She was found hacked to death in her kitchen. The similarities between the Manchester and the Borden murders were striking. They were noted by the jurors. Jose Mello was later convicted of Bertha's murder. 1 year later, it was determined that he was not in Fall River at the time of the Borden murders. But it still must be noted of the striking similarities between the two murders in the same small town. One of the most prominent talking points on the trial and news coverage was that of the hatchet head found in the basement, which the prosecution had not been very convincing of in their claim that it was the murder weapon. The prosecution argued that the killer had removed the handle because it would have been covered in blood. An officer testified that the hatchet handle was found near the hatchet head, but another officer contradicted this. No bloody clothing was found at the scene. Russell testified that on August 8th, she had witnessed Lizzie burn her dress in the kitchen stove, saying the dress had been ruined when she brushed against wet paint. During the trial, the defense never attempted to challenge this testimony. Lizzie's presence at the home was also a point of dispute during the trial. According to testimony, the live-in maid Bridget Sullivan entered the second floor at around 10:58 a.m. and left Lizzie and her father downstairs. Lizzie told several people at the time she went into the barn and was not in the house for about 20 minutes or possibly a half hour. Hyman Lubinsky testified for the defense that he saw Lizzie leaving the barn at 11:03 a.m. Charles Gardner confirmed the time. At 11:10 a.m., Lizzie called Sullivan downstairs, told her Andrew had been murdered, and ordered her not to enter the room. Instead, Lizzie sent her to get the doctor. Both of the victims' skulls had been admitted into evidence during the trial and presented on June 5, 1893. Upon seeing them in the courtroom, Lizzie fainted. Evidence was excluded that Lizzie had sought to purchase hydrochloric cyanide from the local druggist one day before the murders, but the judge ruled that this incident was too remote in time to have any connection. The presiding Associate Justice, Justin Dewey, delivered a summary that supported the defense as his charge to the jury before it was sent to deliberate on June 20th, 1893. After an hour and a half of deliberation, the jury acquitted Lizzie Borden of the murders. Upon exiting the courthouse, she told reporters that she was the happiest woman in the world. The theories. Although Lizzie was acquitted at trial, she remains the prime suspect in her father and stepmother's murders. Writer Victoria Lincoln proposed in 1967 that she may have committed the murders while in a fugue state. Another suggestion is that she may have been physically abused by her father, which drove her to kill him. There is little evidence to support this. Author Evan Hunter in 1984 suggested that Lizzie committed the murders after being caught in a tryst with Sullivan, speculating that Abby had caught the two together and reacted with horror and disgust, and that Lizzie had killed Abby with a candlestick. She made a confession to Andrew when he returned home, but killed him in rage with a hatchet when he reacted exactly the same as Abby had, and further speculated that Sullivan disposed of the hatchet somewhere else afterwards. In later years, Lizzie was rumored to be a lesbian, but there is no such speculation about Sullivan, and later married a man she met while working as a maid in Butte, Montana. She died in 1948. She allegedly gave a deathbed confession to her sister and stated that she had changed her testimony on the stand in order to protect Lizzie. Another theory was Lizzie was enraged about her father killing the pigeons with the hatchet, so she did the exact same thing he did to her pigeons by doing to her father and stepmother. Another significant suspect is John Morse, Lizzie's uncle, who rarely met with the family after his sister died, but he slept in the house that night before the murders. According to law enforcement, he had provided an absurdly perfect and over-detailed alibi for the death of Abby Borden. Morse was considered a suspect by police for a short period of time. A man named William Borden, suspected to be Andrew's illegitimate son, was noted as a possible suspect by author Arnold Brown, who summarized that William had tried and failed to extort money from his alleged father. Author Leonard Robello did extensive research on William Borden and proved that he was not Andrew's son. Although Emma Borden had an alibi at Fairhaven, about 15 miles from Fall River, it is claimed that she might have secretly visited the residence to kill her parents before returning to Fairhaven in time to receive a telegram informing her of the murders. Emma was never considered a suspect by police. She was out of town when the murders took place. She also stayed close to Lizzie throughout the trial. Some have suggested that Lizzie and Bridget conspired to commit the crimes together, either because of their proposed romantic relationship or their mutual dislike of Andrew and Abby. Bridget appeared to know or at least suspect that Lizzie's stepmother was dead before the discovery of the body, as she refused to go upstairs to Abby's bedroom to tell her about Andrew's death. When a neighbor went to get a sheet to cover Andrew's body, Bridget reportedly said, "We'll need two," even though Abby had not been found yet. After Lizzie's trial, the Borden sisters moved into a large modern house in the Hill neighborhood in Fall River. Lizzie began using the name Elizabeth A. Borden at the new house, which Elizabeth dubbed Maplecroft. They had a large staff, including live-in maids, a housekeeper, and a coachman. Because Abby was ruled to have died before Andrew, her estate went first to Andrew, and then at his death, passed to the daughters as part of his estate. A considerable settlement was paid to settle claims to Abby's family. Despite Lizzie's acquittal, she was ostracized by the Fall River High Society. Her name was again brought into the public eye when she was accused of shoplifting in Providence, Rhode Island in 1897. In 1905, shortly after an argument over a party that Lizzie had given actress Nancy O'Neill, Emma moved out of the house and never saw her sister again. Lizzie was sick later in life and she had to get her gallbladder removed, and 1 year later she died of pneumonia on June 1st, 1927, at the age of 66 in Fall River. Funeral details were not given out, and few people attended the funeral. 9 days after this, Emma died from chronic nephritis in a nursing home in Newmarket, New Hampshire. She had moved to the nursing home in 1923 for health reasons, and to avoid renewed attention following the publication of another book about the murders. The Borden sisters both had never been married. They were buried side by side in the family plot at Oak Grove Cemetery. At the time of Lizzie's death, she was worth over $250,000. That's about $5,652,000 with inflation in 2023. She died a very wealthy woman. She owned a home on the corner of French Street and Belmont Street. She had several office buildings and shares in several utilities, 2 cars, and a very large amount of jewelry. She left $30,000, around $678,000 today, to the Fall River Animal Rescue League. She also left $500, around $11,000 today, in a trust for the perpetual care of her father's gravesite. Her closest friend and cousin received $6,000 each, around $136,000 today, a substantial amount of money at the time in 1927. Numerous friends and family members each received between $1,000 and $5,000, $23,000 and $113,000 today. The Borden home is now a museum, and it operates as a bed and breakfast, with the same 1890 styling. Pieces of evidence that were used in the trial, including the hatchet head, are preserved at the Fall River Historical Society. The case has been immortalized with the folk rhyme that was created. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Folklore says that this rhyme was made up by an anonymous writer. Lizzie's stepmother actually suffered 19 blows and her father suffered 11 blows. This rhyme has a less known second verse to it. Andrew Borden is now dead. Lizzie hit him on the head. Up in heaven he will sing. On the gallows she will sing. Lizzie Borden earned infamy that day of the murders. She was in every newspaper across the country. She had the trial of the century, the 1890s version of the O.J. Simpson trial. She has been depicted in books, music, radio, film, theater, and television. There have been countless books written about the murders. The case just exploded. It happened at a time when people thought differently. Juries at the time could only be made up of men, and most men thought women were incapable of murder. It happened at a time without modern forensics, but much more could have been known if the police had done a more thorough job. Everyone in the house should have had their clothing confiscated and checked for blood. The bodies should have been checked for blood. They should not have been able to sleep at the murder scene, even with police stationed out front. Lizzie was still seen going to the basement with a slop pail, and she was bent over washing in the sink for a long period of time, but the police never went to see what she was actually cleaning, or why. She would not have been able to burn her dress if they had confiscated it for evidence. Forensic examination was in its infancy. The crime scene was not protected. The autopsies were performed in the dining room, and the evidence collected was weak at best. Many believe Lizzie Borden got away with murder. If things had gone differently when the police had arrived, even though it was 1892, they could have had enough evidence to convict her if the evidence pointed that way. During the 1890s, the police kinda didn't really know a lot about forensic examination. Blood was washed away within a day. Fingerprints were kind of in their infancy as well. We didn't have DNA. We didn't have blood stain spatter experts. We didn't have any of this fancy stuff you see in a modern CSI or a modern courtroom. They should have done a more thorough search of Lizzie's bedroom and the maid's bedroom to try to find if they had left any bloody clothing, because that would have been a dead giveaway. But unfortunately, none of that happened. And we will never know for sure exactly if Lizzie was the murderer, if she wasn't, if it was a mystery person that came in the house. No one really knows. There are some other theories that are a little more out there. But what do you think happened? Was Lizzie Borden guilty, or was she wrongly accused? Should she have been acquitted? Let me know what you think down there in the comment section below. And I will see you on the next one. Peace.